Hi. It was kind of a rushed presentation when I gave it at the assessment workshop, so I'm going to do a quick video here. Actually, it probably won't be that quick, but I'm going to break it into multiple videos so you can just watch what you want to. We will start with the first video, which I'm going to do right now, is going to be the assessment workshop portion of this PowerPoint slide show. And then I'm going to do another video that will talk mostly about the QEP, what's in the QEP, and then I'm going to do another video on how we're going to assess the QEP, which is where you'll get most of the information about how to fill out the QEP assessment report and how to know if you're somebody that needs to do that. So let's jump right in to our slideshow. So, assessment. Why, what, and how? We do assessment so that we can aim at common goals. It's a way for a large organization to coordinate the efforts of all of its individual components. Ideally, we want to have all of our arrows hitting the same mark. Now, without the right procedures in place, we would get more of a scatter shot type aiming if we're not aiming for the same goals. So assessment is about demonstrating that we are a learning organization. A learning organization is one that puts policies into place, policies and procedures that look at our offerings and come up with measures to test how well we are doing, and also put into place a structure for making decisions about what to do to make things better. What we want to do is be able to show our progress towards institutional goals. In this case, the institutional goal may be one of the university SLOs, or the institutional goal may be a new QEP that we are going to be targeting in the coming years. This process also allows us to make rational decisions about resource allocation. And don't think about that so much as money. It can be about how you're going to teach things, or what courses and what resources in those courses you're going to be using to try to get certain outcomes. And finally, of course, assessment is a component of our SACSCOC accreditation. Now, we don't want to feel like that's the only reason we're doing it. We don't want to feel like the only reason we do an assessment form is so that when they come and visit us in 5 years, we can usher them out the door with plenty of forms in hand. Rather, we want to approach this so that we're trying to get better. You know, when you teach a course, you look at how it went at the end of the semester, and you think about it. And you go, well, you know, this could have gone better, this could have gone better. And hopefully you're changing your approach with the new students, you're changing your approach in new courses, you're changing your approach in old courses to see if you can reach the new students a little bit better. It's about thinking carefully about what you've done, what an objective evaluation of the outcomes are, what that's showing you, and to think about ways to progress, ways to make things better. So what is assessment? Well, assessment starts with goals and objectives. It's all about trying to get somewhere. Now, these terms are a little bit, they're used in different ways in different sources. So for some, the goal is the highest thing, and then you set a number of objectives to try to attain a goal. For others, you set your objectives, and then your goals are steps along the way. In some ways, you could just call them blorgs and schnappets. You know, it doesn't really matter what the word is. One thing is the ultimate outcome that you want. We want to be an institution that is an institution where students thrive. Okay, that's what we ultimately want. Now, to get there, we have to identify what are tangible ways of creating that climate where students thrive. And those would be, you know, the steps along the way to get to your ultimate goal. So this is problematic, the goals and objectives, just because they're used in so many different ways. Now, there are a hierarchy of goals. We have goals that are set by the university, goals that are set by the programs, and goals that are set by individual instructors in their courses. Courses generally align to program goals. As you're teaching your courses that are part of your academic program, you're aligning what it is you do in those courses for the objectives of the program. Well, the program's goals, they're aligned with university goals. So ultimately, our courses align with the program goals, which align with our university goals. Now, we call our goals, the things that we shoot for, learning outcomes, specifically student learning outcomes. And student learning outcomes are those things that we want our students to be able to do after they've had the contact with us in our courses or in our student organizations or in our student services. So here are the definitions. It's important that we all speak the same language, just like blorgs and schnappets don't make much sense if you know what they are, if you don't define them. Goals and objectives, sometimes if they're not defined appropriately, people will argue about them. So I'm just going to give you the terms that we see on our forms that you'll be using to help you along with that. So first, there's mission. A mission is the ultimate goal. It's the objective of a program. It's the reason why it exists. Why does Reinhardt University exist? Well, we have a mission for that. And why do the individual academic programs exist? They have missions written for those too. Outcomes. Outcomes are what we want our students to be able to do. So when we set an outcome, we're setting a level of performance, in essence. Here's where it starts to get a little bit murky. We have this word assessment. We use the word assessment to describe the entire process that we go through. We use the word assessment to talk about the verb of assessing. But on the forms, when you see assessment, sometimes we're talking about the assessment method, and that is a noun, and it means the method or vehicle of assessment. What are we using to determine how our students are performing? What are we using to say whether the students are meeting our outcome goals or not? With assessments, they can be direct and they can be indirect. A direct assessment would be, say, if you're teaching a language course, if you gave maybe an outside nationalized standardized test on language development. So, just a minute. All the things in my knees, it's bothering me. I'm back. So that would be a direct assessment. If you're using a specific test or if you're using a standardized test to measure what your students are able to do, that's a direct assessment. You can also use indirect assessments. Indirect assessments are things that aren't designed to specifically measure student outcomes, but in a roundabout way, indirectly touch that outcome. For example, you could be using a supervisor's review of an intern. That would be an indirect assessment. You could be using maybe even a student's course evaluation responses as an indirect assessment. Assessment level. This is the acceptable level performance for an individual on a method or a vehicle of assessment. So this is what we would want. We would say if a student can do this, we deem it successful. It's kind of a threshold for grouping, right? If they meet the threshold, we group them in the success category. If they don't meet the threshold, we group them in the not a success category. And then we have benchmarks. Benchmarks are a collective level of performance. It's a performance level for a group. Generally speaking, we tend to use percentages of students meeting an assessment level. So if we were going to say on the standardized test, we want them to score a 750 or higher, that would be an assessment level. The assessment method is the standardized test. The assessment level that we've set for individuals is 750. And then our benchmark, we might say we want 70% of the students in this program to score at 750 or higher. So the benchmark is 70% of students. Out of all of our students, we looked at their score on this test, and if they were over 750, we put them in the success category. If we have 70% of our students in the success category, then we've met our benchmark. And those two things come together to make a target. A target is a combination of the assessment level and the benchmark. So you will often see these if you were to download program assessments. You'll see benchmarks like 80% of our students will score 75% or higher on a research paper. Okay, so there, the assessment method was the research paper. That's what we were using to determine performance. The assessment level would be scored 70% or higher. And the benchmark would be, I forget what I used, I think it was 80%. 80% of the students in that program met the assessment level. So assessment level and benchmark together are the target. So here's how we do it. Here is our flow of procedures. The program mission aligns itself to the university mission. There's a place on the form where the program gives its mission, and then directly below it, it states how that mission is tied to the university mission. The program student learning outcomes are aligned with the university student learning outcomes. I believe we have 9 student learning outcomes at the university level. And so as programs create their student learning outcomes, they're aligning those with the university student learning outcomes. Then the program coordinators identify the assessments to measure those SLOs. What are we going to use to determine whether they're meeting our student learning outcome number 1? Well, we might use an in-class essay. That would be one assessment level. And then we might use an interview with the student, and that might be another assessment level. And then we might use a standardized test. So each student learning outcome can have more than one assessment data point. After we've identified those assessments or those tests or those measures, we're going to set targets for the assessment level and for the benchmark. That means we've determined that on this essay, we want our students to score 70% or higher according to our rubric. Okay, so we've set our assessment, it's the essay, and the target or the assessment level was score 70% or better. Now our benchmark is going to be what percentage of the group met the assessment level. So we want 80% of our majors to score 70% or better on the essay. Okay? After you've set those targets, you want to go about collecting your data and providing the actual data, the actual results of the assessment on the assessment form. So that would be going back and saying, okay, well, we gave 12 essays. It looks like we had 11 of them reach 70% and one of them didn't. Okay, so that's, you give the percentage there. I can't do math on the fly like that. But you would go ahead and give the actual results of the assessment. Now, this is the important part. The important part is looking at those results and deciding why are those results the way they are, particularly if you're not quite meeting your target. Is there some reason why students aren't performing the way we want them to? So we analyze those results. We make decisions based on those results. How can we go about covering this material or, giving our classes in such a way that our students can perform at this level? There's also a place to identify budget implications. If there's some need for, let's say, better lab equipment so that students can, more students can do the labs at once, maybe that's a budget implication that you want to note in your assessment form. And then finally, you got to brag some. There's a reason why we put, as if I had something to do with it. There's a reason why there is a highlight section in the program assessment. We want you to brag. We want you to say what went well and give us some of the, the exemplary students and their results. Let us know what is going extremely well in your program. It's important. You should feel good about that, and you should feel no problem sharing how good you feel about how good your program is doing. It's exciting for all of us. Okay, so let's look at the form itself. And this is the Academic Program Assessment Report. This is what academic program coordinators fill out at the end of every year. And it's that time of year right now, isn't it, program coordinators? And so you put in your program, who is the program coordinator, when you submitted it, the reporting period. Here's where the individual program puts its mission, and then how that mission ties into the university mission. These are the possible direct assessment methods: standardized exam, major field examination. You can see them here. We also want to know where you're housing the data for this. Sometimes we house it on EagleWeb. Sometimes we house it in the program coordinator's office. And here are some examples of indirect methods of assessment. Now, here's where the meat and potatoes starts to really get into our assessment meal. Student learning outcome. Here the program would put student learning outcome number 1, and then they would say what measures or what assessments are used to measure how well students are doing in the student learning outcome 1, and then provide a target or an assessment level and a benchmark. They'll do that over here in this column. In the middle column is where you put the actual data. And then finally, in this third column is the important stuff, what you're going to do based on the information you collected here. And then, of course, budget implication. So I'm going to switch now and show you an example of one of these assessment reports. This is the English program assessment for 17-18. So here is the English program mission. The Bachelor of Arts in English provides students with a rich understanding of literary tradition and with language skills that prepare them for a variety of careers or for graduate or professional study. English majors learn to think, read, and write clearly, critically, and creatively. I love that alliteration. They learn to analyze literature through close examination of specific passages, to identify the major periods of literature in Western culture and the major trends in Western thought, and to gain historical and multicultural literary perspectives. So that's the mission for the English program. Here's how that ties into the university mission. The ability to think, read, and write clearly, critically, and creatively contributes, wow, she extended the alliteration. Stunning. Contributes to the intellectual and vocational development of the whole person. So here in the quotation marks is specific reference to the university mission. Okay, in English they use a scoring of an essay. They use a research paper and a research project as direct method of assessment, and those are in the coordinator's office where you can find that data. Indirect, they look specifically at program graduate accomplishments, and so see the highlights, and that's another measure of how well they are doing. So here are the highlights. This has been moved to the end of the form for following years, but again, this is where you brag. This is where you tell us how wonderful everybody did. So we have some wonderful accomplishments from majors and from graduates, so way to go. And then I'm just going to go through one USLO to show you how it's done. Student Learning Outcome 1. Student Learning Outcome 1, a little repetitive. All Reinhardt University English majors will demonstrate sound skills in expository writing as defined by the departmental rubric. So that's what they want them to be able to do, expository writing. Here's how they're going to measure it. The assessment level, and benchmark. Okay? So 70% or more of English majors, that's the benchmark, in English 240, Introduction to Critical Analysis, will demonstrate competency in writing by earning 70% or higher, that's the assessment level, on an in-class essay exam requiring students to evaluate the Tolkien work using criteria from a glossary of literary terms, as well as class lecture and discussion, assuming an assessment based solely on compositional matters as defined by the departmental rubric. So this essay and rubric are the assessment. All right, let's go over that again. 70% or more, that's the benchmark. We'll score 70% or higher, that's the level, on an essay, that's the assessment. All right. Here's another assessment they have for SLO 1. 80% or more of English majors in 303 Shakespeare will demonstrate mastery of expository writing by earning 80% or higher on a research paper, requiring students to examine character, a theme, and issue in political, social, philosophical, literary concern. Again, this is based on compositional matters, not necessarily content. Again, 80% or more of English majors. That's the benchmark. Will demonstrate mastery of expository writing by earning 80% or higher on a research paper. So 80% is the assessment level, and the research paper is the assessment. So here's the actual data. 100% of English majors in English 240 demonstrated competency in expository writing by earning a 70% or higher. We wanted at least 70%, 100% did it. Okay, that's 3 out of 3. There were 3 English majors that accomplished that. In this second assessment here, 100% of the English majors again demonstrated mastery of expository writing by earning 80% or higher on a research paper. That was one major. So batting batting 1,000 here in the English department on expository writing. So this was the actual data, the actual results from those essays and from that research paper. And then analysis and action, what you're going to do different based on the results. Now, I really like this because despite 100% completely meeting the criteria, we're not satisfied. We're still going to get better. In reading through these essays, they noticed that 2 did make some errors in commas. So next time the instructor teaches this course, he will remind students of the rules of punctuation and direct them to review those rules in writing handbook before he gives an in-class essay. They were having a comma problem. They're going to go over the comma rules. So the English major did meet the benchmark. The student's editing and proofreading skills could have been enhanced by a requirement that the student read their papers verbatim to the class on the days devoted to oral reports. Okay? So, again, we have some actions to take the next time these courses roll around to continually improve the performance of our students on these outcomes. All right. So we've gone over what we do in program assessments. Because we're starting a QEP assessment that's being done by all faculty, not just those that are used to doing these assessments. So I want to just real quickly have a look at this form here. You'll see that it's very similar to the program assessment form, only there are a few more check boxes and options. So we have the course code and the instructor. You'll notice this is not program and the program coordinator. We have 2 different objectives. We have HIP, undergraduate research, internship, service, learning, study abroad. We have HIP level, first year developing or senior level. Roster applies to the entire roster or applies to individuals. Student learning outcomes, we have asterisks, refer to QEP objectives and SLOs, refer to HIP taxonomy for selected HIP. So that's what the subject of the next video is going to be. It's going to be about our QEP, what our objectives for the QEP are, global pathways and professional development, what HIPs are, the high impact practices, the 4 that we've chosen, and how to determine whether the HIPs that are being deployed in our courses are a first year level HIP, a developing HIP, or a senior level HIP. So that is what's to come. I hope you've enjoyed this. I certainly have. See you soon.